Hello and welcome on our channel. And we continue studying psychology today and mental processes, and here we see this plan for today. At first we will talk about the mental processes in animals and the physiology of the sensory system, and to connect it with the signals and environment and how animals can communicate with each other. And let's go back to the last slides of the previous practical. We have completed one part of this table, and today we will talk about cognitive abilities and namely communication. And here is designated as language or just speech. It's a speech as a performance, because in animals the language is not as developed as a human's language. Animals use verbal or non-verbal communication and have something similar to performance, like a show. And the terms we considered in the previous practical are part of the cycle of actions here. We see this, and here is our work for today. It is the first perception. Perception is one of the most important topics in the psychology, because it's concerted with the detection of the sensory stimuli and therefore with the interpretation and assertion and a pattern recognition. Thanks to sensory system, but it has a part that is located in the brain. Life, its events and processes are only a set of integral sensory stimuli of the external environment, forming a single consistent picture. And language or expression of one state, not only with the help of speech and sounds, but also with the help of emotions and even appearance. And we connect all this cycle in one, and here we see this a complex of verbal and non-verbal communication. And you see the verbal includes like a speaking and sounding, that is linguistic and paralinguistic channels for communication, and non-verbal signals, everything that is silent but look, facial expression, touch, body movements, even poses, just poses can say something, and poses on the distance, and and also color and elements, decoration, like in these birds, for example. This really reminds me of someone like humans, this woman, and if someone blows that he is not handsome enough, he can even use elements of decoration himself, like this parrot. For example, he decorates himself with pieces of the paper, making his look longer, feathers, and apparently the length of the feathers is critical, very similar to some birds like this, for example. But there is this bird, saw a paradise bird in nature, never saw this. They live in completely different parts of the earth. And even let's watch the video with these birds. It's very interesting how these birds to use this paper.
Trying to make a long tail. As you can see, some papers are really long, just like regular parrots. There you go, another one coming up. She's tucking into her tail. That's good. Looks good though. But not a green tail, but white tail. Alright, keep going. Let me see your face.
So this parrot is really nice and very funny. So we find ourselves in the world of information and the ability to perceive it, and where the choice of what to respond to is not, however, always as clear-cut as this. The animal may be receiving many different sorts of information at the same time, most of which may have some significance for its survival and reproduction. For example, if maybe receiving information about food and water as well as about its predator, the fly that has landed in its bag and so on. If it then has to choose between the different sorts of information, since organs are providing it with selectively ignore there and sometimes changing which information it makes use of at any one time. So sometimes it's very difficult to understand what is very important in this time, what it's just to need to ignore. Where there are no predators around, information about food may be responded to very strongly, but once the predator appears, sensory information about food not has to be ignored, and the animal must start responding instead to the more immediate threat to its life. So it's just to work the dominant center in the nervous system in the brain, and decision making of this sort of an inevitable outcome of receiving a large amount of sensory input. So that this present today on the sensory boards of animals will lead naturally into next practical of motivation and decision making. Information about what stimuli animals are capable of detecting is clearly an essential preliminary to understanding their behavioral, but it's only the first stage, and it would be easy to make the mistake of thinking that all we need to know about how animals respond to stimuli is to understand how the sense organs transform energy from the environment, for example, just light or sound, magnetism, and etc., into nerve impulses which can then be interpreted or recognized by the brain. However, after the sense organs have responded, the brain still has to interpret the stream of incoming sensory messages, and this process of interpretation is extremely complex and far from fully understood even now. And in our practicals of physiology we have some practical about how animals feel something, and here we see some links. I will leave, as usual, I will leave these links in description to this video, and you can to understand its more detail. If you have already studied animal physiology with us, then you already know how the sensory system works, and you can find links here, or you can use our lectures in a Moodle, and therefore I will not describe in detail the sensory system like it works. I will focus on the differences of superpowers that will determine the behavior of the animals. For example, why the animals is active at night, for example, not in the daytime. And now we need to talk about the components of a communication system. We have many new words. I do the vocabulary, and this you see the sender, an individual that transmits a signal. receiver, an individual who's probably to behaving in a particular ways, altered by the signal in the channel, the medium through which the signal is transmitted. It can be the auditory channels, it can be just a visual or vocal. We have this is for auditory channels. The signal, the behavioral, it's a posture, display, it can be just transmitted by the sender, and context, the setting in which the signal is transmitted and received, and noise, its background activity in the channel which is irrelevant to the signal being transmitted, and code, the complete set of possible signals and contexts, on the just it is a part of examples how it work in nature, how it work now. Just like example, I take this acoustic communication in water. Of course, here we see this, but all sense organs are part of the nervous system of the body, and thanks to them the body will know what is happening around in the external environment, and every animal inhabits a world of its own whose character is shaped by the information of received from its sense organs, and different information is important for each animal. Respectively, the sense organs are adapted to environment and needs. So in water it is better to use acoustic signals, and here we see these animals which and a lot of animals use acoustic signals, and we will talk about later about this. But sometimes you see here these noises, biotic noises, but biotic noises too, but very very important now about noises which do the ships. And you know that sometimes it is just very very dangerous for some kinds of animals which live in the water and use this acoustic system for communication. As observers, as interpreters of animal behavior, we would be greatly handicapped if we had to rely solely on the evidence of our own senses. Fortunately, modern technology makes it possible for us to overcome some of our own limitation and being to enter the sensory world of the other species. And we are now in a better position to begin to understand the world of the animal communication, and many of the most important external stimuli to which animals respond come from signals given by other animals of their own species, from their parents, or from their own offspring, for example, or from rivals or potential mates. Let's look at the most common senses organs and start with vision. Here we see many animals are able to see ultraviolet light, light of much shorter wavelengths than our eye are sensitive to. This means that bees foraging on flowers respond to colors and patterns that are invisible to us, and vice versa, since we have a great sensitivity to red or long wavelength. Bits fly to the flowers of white, for example, white color, because they reflect a large amount in ultraviolet. Also they appear to us as pale green and provide light contacts with the leaves. And you know, here the vision, like human can vision these colors, and here we see this kind of flowers, like the bees see these flowers, and of course attention can be more for this kind of flowers and this kind of color. At the other end of the visual spectrum, some snakes can see infrared region, that is the heat given off by their warm-blooded prey. It's something in the different ways. Infrared radiation has a longer wavelength than the visible light on the electromagnetic spectrum, as seen in the figure. Infrared radiation is between the visible spectrum and radar with a wavelength between 700 nanometers and 1000 nanometers, and snakes are able to detect very slight difference in infrared radiation in order to tell the difference between the environment, their own body even. And here we see like the snake sees the warm hand of the human, and even if the human hand is hot while the holding a old cold snake. This adaptation is often referred to as infrared vision, but this sense is separate from the snake's eye. It's not the same. The snake's brain is able to combine information from the both types of vision, from eye and special organs, and this combine information from the both types of vision to form an image of its surrounding. The snake's eyeball is used to sense visible light, and the snake has a pit organ that absorbs infrared radiation. And here we see this organ even the part of the face, like I say, this face of the snake. And the snake uses two parts here. This is the eye information, and from this sensitive membrane here we see this a part of this membrane very sensitive to these lights. And how the animals just watch this mouse. Not only birds, not only mouse, any animals can be watched. So another ability of animals is the ability to sense the magnetism of the earth, and maybe this does not help them communicate much, but it helps them migrate in parks, and this is already the formation of communities. And sometimes the animals use this for move for a long distance. But one more visual capacities for species go beyond us by being sensitive to the plane of polarization of the light, and light reaching is as from areas of blue sky is vibrating, and this vector change in a regular fashion which respects to the apparent position of the sun as it moves across the sky. Thus, animals that use the sun for navigation can potentially know where the sun is, even if all they can see is a patch of the blue sky. And you know the name swanfish, and here showed just bees can indeed use the pattern of polarization of light to locate the sun's position even when it is absorbed by clouds or screen. And bees have a small dorsal region on the retina which has a row of analyzers, and each of which is maximally sensitive to the differences E vector. And even these bees use vector for speaking with each other, in contact with each other. And About navigation, about using these sense organs, we will talk about in the next practical. And hearing, one more sensitive organs. Here are familiar with the vision, sound devices which are sold to someone pets dogs or rodents pests. This produce height sounds at about 20 kilohertz, and this well outside the sensitivity in human ears, and even with the ultrasonic sounds. Some animals use these sounds. Here we see these ultrasonic sounds very often, and even cats and dogs and rabbits, and humans don't hear just anything. And here we see the one more animals which use it constantly. Many animals hear well about this, and in bats this capacity is specific and specialized to a remarkable extent. About 70% of red bat species feed on insects, and most of them use a form of sonar that enables them to detect flying insects even in a just darkness. And here we see this kind of detection like echolocation and special senses. But dolphins and propose to use sonar to track fish in dark waters, and also they also pick up the noises made by the fish themselves. Both bats and dolphins use their sonar to build sound pictures, like in the environment around them. Just as with the human sonar, they emit pulses of sound and then detect the returning echoes bounced off objects of the environment. Unlike the relatively slow sonar pulses of a submarine, however, bats can emit up to 100 pulses a second, and then remarkably listen to the echoes coming back between each pulse. And different objects distort the sound in different ways, so that by comparing the original sound it met with the destroyed echoes that come back to it, the bat gains information about the size or shape or speed of movement and surface properties of the what is special that is around it. And the dolphins do the same, and here we see the special part of the brain and a special part of the organs which helps to connect with special part of the head which just produces sound. First produces sound and catch the echo which move in this part of the head and the picture inside the brain. Ultrasounds are too high in frequency for us to perceive. At the opposite end of the sound spectrum are infrasounds, sounds that are too low in frequency for us to hear. Whales and elephants even use the sounds, ultrasounds, to communicate over long distance. Elephants use low frequency rumbles, as I said, from the 10 to 35 Hz sounds to keep in touch with other members of their group, and these are very powerful and clearly effective over distance from the 1-2 kilometers long distance. Also, we cannot hear the lowest of these sounds that can be felt as vibration, and chased by the person standing close to elephant feels this. There's a lot of energy in the air movements produced by such huge animals. In the ocean, the same, with the even large body size and less attentional of sound energy in the dense medium of water whales can communicate this way, and some owls use in darkness, use some specific building of this his head, especially for owls. It's very important. When around it is complete dark, some owls hunt in complete darkness, not by emitting sounds of their own, but by being extremely sensitive to sounds made by their prey. The barn owl's hearing is so good, for example, that it can locate a mouse in complete darkness simply by homing in the sound of the mouse rustling through leaves or even just chewing. On hearing the sound, the owl turns its dash-like face toward the source until it's pointing directly towards it, and then launches. And here we see this location. In addition, barn owls have a symmetrical location, position of their ears. Here we see on the skull, with it of the left ear being above the mind point of the eye, and then of the right one below it. This gives them the ability to pinpoint the mouse's position in the vertical plane as well, and the owl use the intensively difference between its two ears to home in on the sound. Since then the two ears, they being equally stimulated, the sound must be coming from the point directly between them. And here we see this location like a target, and this gives information about where the mouse is in horizontal left-right plane, and here in vertical plane as well. So it's absolutely sense. So animals can also pick up pattern of disturbance caused by object moving near them without possessing that we would conventionally call ears. Fishes, for example, poses a lateral line. Here we see this lateral line, and here this line organ, effectively a row of little pressure sensor called neuromasts down each side of the body that allow them to pick up mechanical vibration in the water. And lateral line organs are most developed in fish that live in a dark caves or the deep ocean where there is not light enough. But even fish with normal eyesight can, in calm darkness, collect detailed information about the presence of the other fishes and the school predators, for example, and so on. So what we have, one more sense. We are generally aware that the chemical senses, taste and smell, are often far more highly developed in other animals than in ourselves. The insects are famous in this regard. On emerging from the cocoons, female silk moth emits scent that is extremely attractive to any male within the white radius. And the males located the females entirely by their odor and are able to pick up the scent of the female when it is even produce 100 molecules of sex odor substance per cubic centimeter of air. And these organs here, we see this very big for head, this animal, for this insect, but the antennae of the male resemble minute test tube cleaning brushes. So the signals must be effective in the environment in which the sender and receiver live. This necessarily improves constraints on the form of communication used. So using this form, chemical senses For example, it's very important, of course, but the scent detection of dogs, legendary, and it's nice that for once controlled scenic investigation have amply borne out popular belief. Dogs have a huge area of olfactory epithelium on the inside of the nasal cavity, where densely packed scent cells pick up scent molecules and transmit nerve impulses into olfactory parts of the brain. And large dog has over 15 times the area of epithelium of a human and 100 times the density of the scent cells per unit area. This is a huge investment in the sense of smell, and we know how far the sense dominates the life of dogs. And even pigs and bears have made an even greater investment and use their sense of smell to detect roots. For example, the mushrooms, we use pigs for found this expensive mushrooms like a truffle, but what we have in general, visual signals are unlikely to be much used in dance, like a forest, for example, but may be more effective than sounds and odors in face-to-face confrontations over food. Visual signals are influenced not just by the amount of light available, but also by the fact that some wavelengths are scattered or absorbed more than others in their journey from the signaler to receiver, and this fact is particularly striking in clear water, while blue light is about 475 nanometers, travels particularly well, but red light, longer wavelength, or ultraviolet, shorter, and simply filter it out by the water. And it is almost the same like a Earth magnetic. You see this very the same, but the Earth magnetic field can be detected by the certain bacteria even, which contain pieces of magnetite, by some fish, by amphibians such as the red-spotted, and even by migrating birds. The exact mechanism by which birds detect the Earth magnetic field and how they might use it's however still a matter of active debate. My problem is that the Earth field is extremely weak, and so it's difficult to see how it could be detected at all. But we have this with light. One cute is that magnetic orientation appears to be possible under short violet, blue or green light, but not under the red light, and this has given rise to the idea that magnetoreception might be dependent on molecules called cryptochromes that are blue light. Photoreceptors found in plants, insects and birds, and have a response to light that is affected by the applied magnetic fields, and have despite 40 years of research, magnetic detection in birds still remains a considerable mystery. And here I just leave the links to this article, how some birds can to feel this magnetic orientation. And we say that signals and environment are very close to each other, and the environment in which signals are used is clearly likely to influence their form, because receivers will find it easier or more difficult to detect particular kinds of signal in different surroundings. This affects fundamental filters of signals, such as choice, a sensory channel, since the transmission properties of different channels suited to the different physical condition, and the choice of channel and variation in signals within channels may also be influenced by the biotic environment of the sender and receiver. For instance, the distribution of food resource, of the likelihood of ever dropping by predators. We say about this, and very often the just acoustic communication signal face to fundamental problems in their transmission through the environmental. Because it can be just degraded or destroyed, both of which diminishing or compute the signals as it travels between sender and receiver, and various studies suggest low frequency sounds are used to overcome problems with signal attention. And one more effect of biotic environment, like a biological noise, you know this, and signals and receivers just sometimes male birds seen from the vantage point in its territory. In many species, males seen only during the breeding season, when their testosterone levels are high, and they seen much more when they are animated. A person, animated female of the same specific, might treat it as an invitational to approach, while a compressive male is more likely to regard it as a threatening and to keep away. A peasant male of different species might simply ignore its scening and carry on regardless, unless of course it was a predator, in which case it might home in on the sender as a source of food, and signalers and receivers thus become part of the broader communication networks in which unwelcome or otherwise. So it is very big problem to be in time, in this place, in special place, in this special time. So the problem of pattern recognition, it is always with this, it can be just discrimination and memorability signals, detectability in this way. So first we shall look at some of the characteristics of signals and how they convey message from the sender, how the sender can say what it wants. The most manifestation of what we think of as communication is the stylized signal or display by one individual, modifying the response of another. A real backing or from the tooth backing display of the dominant male wolf, for example, is a red example. Signals in this case are distinctive, often overdone action or just like a presentation what we want, and that have evolved to be noticeable and attentional. And while this may be the classical view, however, things are not always so straightforward. And for a start, signals are not always stylized or even necessarily obvious to a third party observers like us. In many cases, the behavior of receivers change in response to stable movements or slight changes of posture in another individual, especially in social spaces, and a signal need to even be present for its signal to have an effect. outdoor signals, for example, disposed on the substrate, for example, can influence the behavioral of recipients hours or even days after the departure of the signaler. And here also always we see that animals use just urine for give some signal for the animals of which spice. Selection. Well, then for dogs that make a show of boring their teeth because the rivals will move away without the need for a costly fight. Teeth baring, this becomes just like a presentation, just displays that I want to say that I am strong, I am alpha, and I want to be here. You should to go away. For instance, the mammalian habit of making a territory boundary with the urine may have evolved from urination as an autonomic hair response when rivals were encountered. And in the classical ethological view, this ritualization was seen as the process of reducing the of signals. Signals benefit from ritualization because it is just one signal from another and reduce the risk of confusing the receiver. Stereotyped trial signal clearly started I am likely to attack, and the receiver was unlikely to misread. It is I am scared still of you, and here just we don't understand what is mean. No, we know about this snake, what is mean. It's a very strong position. It's ready for attack, but if we know we understand it. So it is the signals can also be complex of the sense of being multi-component. And here we discuss about this hypothesis. One arrangement is that the multiple components serve to enhance the accuracy with which receivers are able to assess signals. The backup hypothesis, while another is the provide information about different qualities of the signal, the multiple message hypothesis. And of course the signals must be effective in the environment. We said that some lights can't to be visible in some areas. So it's about the water and red color, and why this reason why so many reef fishes are blue or yellow color or have strikes, black and white strikes that are also visible in the sea water, and the very bad visible the red color. Even in the land, some violets and light travel better than other, and some colors patterns may be more long distance visible on more distance. It's very important to have this type of signals and chemical, auditory, visual, and even tactile signals in different channels. And the ability, it's good, fast, it's good or not for say something. But to what extent signals generally cover information about all animal state and how honestly they convey it, we will know what is just recognize three kinds of semantic information in animal communication system: intention, quality assessment, and information about the environment. Here we see I just don't stop on here. And many animals use visual signals to demonstrate their danger. So, for example, poisonous. This chemical difference occur when the animal produces strange sensation, and for example, neurotoxic poison or just a bad taste, and has the different very strange color. For example, this frog blue colored, and it's a signal for animals. Of course, the signals, and honestly question. Sometimes other animals use this strange color or just strange strikes which demonstrate that these animals are poisonous, and we see that Constance may be tempted to lie about their true state, but that dishonestly can be pushed. So just how honest are signals likely to be? And receivers may pay a variety of time and energy and lose opportunity cost of if they put a lot into just assessing signals. If may therefore pay them to be slightly less than thought and accept a margin of risk that a signal may not be true on the part of the receivers, lead us to expect strike honesty to be an expression rather than rule. And here we see this just a bug which looks like a spider. For example, this beetle in a process of evolution aspired the color of the original wasp, and which protected it from the bird attack. For example, this a lot of examples with this wasp's color and even a snake's color, and like a coral snake, very poisonous. But this kind of snake is absolutely unpoisonous, and here we see the kinds of true frogs with the poisonous and not poisonous, and here we see this just a caterpillar like which looks like a snake, and so it is a protection and signals too. And one more, we say that is exactly, it is a mimicry is one of the most fascinating phenomena in the world. Moreover, it can be used for different purposes. Some inhabitants of the fauna use the resemblance of animals and plants for self-defense, while others try to almost literally be wolves in sheep's clothing, like sheep in wolf's clothing, and confusing potential prey with their face color. And when, as you can see, even the animals themselves are quite difficult to understand, the signals they transmit, and that to say about people, what to say, who are trying to communicate with animals, I mean veterinarians. So I want to return to the slide where we will find a place for emotions. Do you remember the emotion? I want to show the place of emotions. They not only show us the mental state of the animal, but are also a manifestation of the mental process, which means that not all animals are able to express them, but we will talk about this later, of course. But you know, the animals can just expression of emotions, and in animals can be a separate type of communication that must be understood, especially veterinarians. And here we see the relaxed, frustrated, and happy animals. And this classification, even I have the classification of, is for humans, but for animals we can divide it emotion into positive and negative, for example. And we see that positive ones are manifested in joy of meeting the plane, in a relaxed state, on just be happy, or sad. All emotion, including the basic emotion, can find their location in the cycle of circumplex, which means that different emotions have different arousal of hedonic parameters. the reason for basic emotion being basic is that there can also be arranged of the spatial location with two-dimension coordinate plane, and the typical location of the four basic emotions such as that they have different parameters like a code effects. And we will talk about the emotion. It is very important for veterinary doctors, and here we see even, but negative ones are more, here we see are more difficult to understand it because they can signal even a pain or just aggression. Here we see the negative one, and it's not positive. Here we see aggression and pain, and if the animal feels the pain, it can be with aggression to people. Often animals that experience pain are aggressive or even sad. And here you see the examples of this. If you work in a clinic, you often just meet this situation. Here I will post a link to the article how it is important for veterinary doctors. I just leave links on this article, and even I leave the link to this very important book for veterinary doctors, and it has a lot of useful information you found in this book, and I want to pay attention to the identifiers, the expression of the eyes position, especially here we see this eyes position, and here eyes position, eyes, here eyes, and not only eyes, of course, is the position of the ears, and of course the position of the tail. You know this. With a tail, not everything is so simple, especially in a dog's tail, wherein is a manifestation of positive emotions, and in a cat it's aggression and discontent. Maybe this is the reason for why these two kinds of domestic animals don't understand of each other, just can't find the common language to communication. But of course it's not always. Sometimes the animals when they have very friendly relationship, especially if these animals live in one family. It's like one family completely, but very often just don't understand in this article, scientists tried to uncover the world of emotions even in farm animals. It's very important sometimes, and what kind of emotion encompass cognitive and behavioral responses to reward and punishment, using contests as a case study, and awards propose that short-term emotions and the brain animals segments decision making and behavioral. And here we see the same, for example, contest assessments to emotional. We describe how constants appearance more than resource value and outcome probability. These appearances elicit the cognition, drive, and neuropsychology that aggressive behavioral, and we discuss how recent contest outcomes induce long-term moods which impact subsequent contest behavioral. And finally we distinguish between internal objectively relevant and incidental objective irrelevant emotions and moods, affective states. And like ecological models, our approach predicts that incidental events influence contest dynamics, and that contents become incidental influence and themselves potentially causing this decision making. So next one, Next one, I want to show you the video about emotion in animal contests and how it is important to try training of animals. And next practical we will have this term of motivation, and return to this video, but just now let's look the video.
Class is Pink, the Border Collie, handled by Jennifer Crank from Pickerington, Ohio.
Pink wants to get the party started tonight.
That is it.
Jennifer making sure Pink's in that contact zone. Jennifer's up ahead right there. Look at Pink fly! You can't stay ahead of Pink for too long. Stay. Good job. Look at the extension Pink is doing on each jump. Just beautiful. Nice extension all the way.
Pay attention to emotion of this dog after this.
Moving clean.
Yes.
Phenomenal job. And Pink will win it.
And look at this, very happy, so much motion,
Beautiful lines. Jennifer out in front.
not only in owners but in the dogs too.
Look at this run here at the end. Nothing's going to stop them. Nothing's going to stop them right here. Just beautiful.
Yes, look on the eyes, it is happy
Not known
dog.
to be much of a cuddler, but cuddling right there after a victory for the
Of course, it is a victory.
16-inch.
Very soon we will talk about emotions, hormones and motivation in the near further, because this dog definitely has the emotion of completing tasks, sources, replacing the usual rewards in the form of food, treats. As you remember the previous our practical, we use the treats for cats, and this cat do some tasks, but not so quickly, and of course not so happy. We saw a very smart animal, and so it's time to talk about language and intelligence. And here was this one tables, some tables. Donald Griffin has suggested that the communication system of animals provide a window in their thoughts and feelings, and after all, our limited insights into the thoughts and feelings of our fellow humans come about only if people tell us about them, either verbally or non-verbally, and cross biases comparisons with the human language center of the so-called design. Thousands of languages proposed original, and here this is a connection to these parts of the table. And even numerous attempts have been made at across-the-board comparisons, but the comparisons with the human language have likely focused on the capacities for opens and displacement, that is the extent to which the communication system of other species show unlimited score for coining new messages and an ability to refer to things remote in time and space from the signal. So it's one communication system that has provoked particularly heated debate about its language-like qualities, is the celebrated foreign dance of the honeybees. You know, this very important acknowledge. And Carl von Frisch, do you remember this name? We discussed about the fact that worker honeybees somehow, like other workers, to source for food, has been known for centuries, and was remarked upon by Aristotle, but how this came about was not unrelated until the mid-20th century. And work of Carl von Frisch. It is very important. Frisch decorated the secret language, and even he couldn't quite believe that he had found. Was it really possible for a creature with a brain smaller than a pinhead had to be something so clever? Most researchers have long since stopped asking whether bees communicate in this way, and concentrated on working out how the dense amounts the most forms of animal communication outside of primates, for example. And so we have even these links, and we can just watch these animals dance and how it is important for communication of these animals. So we are making some progress in understanding communication in the animal kingdom. A very different approach is to use whether it is possible to teach the other animals aspects of language, and use it to explore cognitive potential via the skills so acquired. Most of the effort has done into trying to teach language skills to a person, for example this monkey, chimpanzee, on the questionable basis that is our closest living relatives, they are most likely to show some opportunities for human-like skills. Problem with this is that living pairs are not part of the hominid evolutionary lines, and are thus likely to be specialized in other ways, maybe. And so it's next parts slides, it's just a summary what we talk about today. This is a summary for today's practice, and as usual I leave the homework for you. It is our book Animal Behavior. You should read the pages in chapter 4 about the communication and migration, and one more book here, which is a book an introduction in animal behavior. In chapter 3 the pages about stimuli and communication. So as usual I see you later in our practical classes and on our channel. So it's bye bye.